The courtroom fell silent as the tomb guard stepped forward, his polished boots clicking like a metronome on the wooden floor. Corporal Jake Mitchell, standing tall in the crisp blue uniform of the 3rd Infantry Regiment, wore the Medal of Honor proudly over his heart. Whispers floated through the crowd, some filled with awe, others tinged with disbelief. Judge Harlan's eyes narrowed as he leaned forward, voice sharp like a blade slicing through the quiet. "Remove that medal, Corporal. This is a courtroom, not a parade." Jake's gaze met the judge, steady, unyielding. The air thickened, heavy enough to stop a heart. No one realized yet that in the back row, a retired colonel who owed her life to Jake was already rising, ready to shake the courtroom to its core with a truth that would shatter the judge's authority forever. Let me back up a second. This all happened in Warrenton, Virginia, a town where history clings to the air like humidity after a storm. The courthouse was an old brick building, squat and solid, its colonial steeple piercing a gray sky. Inside, the wooden floors creaked underfoot, and ceiling fans spun lazily, barely stirring the stale air. Today, the courtroom was packed not because of the boring road easement dispute they were hearing, but because of one man. Word spread fast. A tomb guard still on active duty, wearing the nation's highest military honor, was called to testify. Locals, veterans, a smattering of reporters squeezed into the pews, eyes glued to the courtroom door. When the bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Harlan," the room stood as chairs scraped the floor. Judge Harlan was a tall man, in his 60s, with a face carved from decades of wielding power. His black robe draped over his shoulders like a shroud of authority, and his cold gray eyes swept the room like a hawk spotting prey. The bailiff called the first witness. "Corporal Jake Mitchell, please take the stand." The silence that followed felt like a physical weight pressing down on everyone's chest. Jake stepped inside, 28 years old, tall and lean, his face older than his years, eyes deep and unreadable. His tomb guard cap sat perfectly atop cropped hair, and his uniform was immaculate, the dark blue coat, crisp white trousers, black shoes polished to a mirror shine. Each step he took echoed precision, the same precision drilled into him at Arlington National Cemetery, where he guarded the tomb of the unknown soldier. 21 steps, pause, turn, repeat. The Medal of Honor gleamed against his chest, the blue ribbon stark beneath the courtroom lights. Some veterans in the back shifted, fingers twitching involuntarily, as if to salute. Jake turned sharply toward the courtroom and stood at attention, every movement a testament to discipline. Judge Harlan's eyes locked on the medal. His voice cut through the hush like a knife. "Before you're sworn in, remove that medal. This is a courtroom, not a military ceremony." A low murmur rippled through the crowd, soft but electric. Jake didn't move, his gaze steady on the judge. "With all due respect, Your Honor," he said calmly, "this medal isn't mine. I wear it for the men who never came home." The judge's face tightened, his tone icy. "I don't care who it belongs to, Corporal. This is my courtroom, and I set the rules. Remove it, or you won't testify." The tension thickened, an older woman clutching her purse, a veteran shifting uncomfortably. Jake's hands stayed at his sides, eyes locked on the judge's, silent but resolute. For a moment, it seemed he might refuse. Then, with the same deliberate care he used at the tomb, he unclasped the Medal of Honor and set it gently on the wooden ledge beside the microphone. The soft clink echoed like a gunshot. The crowd exhaled, some in disbelief, others simmering with quiet anger. The judge nodded sharply. "Swear him in." Jake raised his right hand. "I, Jake Mitchell, do solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God." The bailiff stepped back. "You may be seated." Jake sat rigid, eyes distant beyond the judge, as the plaintiff's attorney, a young man named Paul Simmons, stepped forward. "Please state your name and occupation for the record." "Jake Mitchell, United States Army, 3rd Infantry Regiment. Tomb Guard, Arlington National Cemetery." Simmons nodded. "Were you present at the property in question on April 12, 2025? "Yes," Jake replied, voice steady and gravelly. The questions were dry about the easement, the road, the neighbor dispute. Jake answered clearly but clipped. Yet nobody was listening to the legal mumbo-jumbo. Their eyes kept drifting to the Medal of Honor lying on the ledge, stripped of its place on his chest, the symbol now feeling out of place, wrong like a flag flown upside down. Simmons pressed on, sensing the tension. Can you describe what you saw when you arrived? Jake leaned in. I was visiting my neighbor, Mr. Larson. His family's owned that land since the Civil War. I got there around 7 a.m. The gate was open, but two men I didn't recognize were measuring the boundary with some laser device. They told me I didn't have permission to be there. And did you? Simmons asked. I've had access for years. Mr. Larson's father served with my uncle. They gave me a key to that gate when I was a kid. Simmons nodded, signaling no further questions. Then the opposing counsel, Richard Hayes, slick and sharp, took the floor, smiling coldly. Corporal, you mentioned a key. Was it legally given to you? Jake's eyes flicked to Hayes, then back to the judge. It was a gift from the Larsons. I've used it for 20 years without issue. Hayes smirked. 20 years is a long time. Memories fade, don't they? Jake's jaw tightened, but his voice didn't waver. I don't forget what matters. The crowd stirred in approval. Hayes pressed on. So your memory of this agreement is perfect? I know what I was told, and I know what I owe. Hayes' smile faltered. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Harlan snapped, voice cold. Let's keep this moving. This isn't a history lesson or a war memorial. Facts, not feelings. The words hit like a slap. A man in a Vietnam veteran cap clenched his fists. A woman whispered, That's not right. The courtroom's energy shifted, a current of unease flowing through the pews. Simmons stood again, trying to regain control. Your Honor, may I recall the witness if needed? Harlan waved him off. Fine. Step down. Jake rose deliberately, glanced briefly at the Medal of Honor on the ledge, then returned to his seat. The medal remained a small piece of metal carrying the weight of the entire room. Then it happened. From the back, a woman stood 50, short-cropped hair, military posture that filled the space effortlessly. Colonel Amanda Reynolds, retired, once Jake's commander in Afghanistan, spoke calmly but firmly. Your Honor, may I speak? The judge snapped his head up, eyes sharp behind his glasses. This is a court of law, ma'am. Unless you're counsel or a subpoenaed witness, you have no standing. Amanda cut him off, voice steady. I am Colonel Amanda Reynolds, United States Army, retired. I served with Corporal Mitchell in Afghanistan, and I was there when he earned that medal you asked him to remove. I would like to address this court. The room froze. Even a bailiff glanced at the judge, unsure what to do next. Harlan's face twitched, caught off guard. This is highly irregular. You have no standing here. I have the standing of someone who owes her life to that man, Amanda replied, stepping into the aisle. Her voice wasn't loud, but it thumped like a drumbeat. In 2019, in Helmand Province, our convoy was ambushed. 12 of us pinned down, taking fire from 3 sides. Jake ran through a hail of bullets, pulling us out one by one. He carried me 200 yards, even with a bullet in his leg. That medal isn't just a decoration, it's a debt. The courtroom was silent. Every word landed like a stone. A young man in the second row quietly raised his phone. Jake Morales, a freelance reporter streaming live. Judge Harlan's face turned red. Colonel, you are out of order. Sit down, or I will have you removed. Amanda didn't budge. With respect, Your Honor, you're the one out of order. Jake Mitchell isn't just a soldier's tomb guard. Every step he takes at Arlington is for the unknowns who gave everything. You asked him to remove their memory. You asked him to break his oath. Murmurs exploded into a roar. A veteran in a wheelchair stood, trembling but resolute. Another, then another. They didn't need to speak, their silence spoke volumes. Jake's live stream surged to thousands of viewers. Harlan banged his gavel, voice cracking. Order. I will have order in this court. But the crowd had already turned. Their eyes locked on Jake, Amanda, and the medal resting on the ledge. Jake rose again, unprompted, stepped to the stand, picked up the Medal of Honor, holding it tight in his hand. He didn't pin it back on, just held it, knuckles white. "I'm not here for myself," he said, voice cutting through the noise. "I'm here for the men who never got to speak, for the ones who never came home." Amanda stepped closer, standing beside him. "This isn't about a road or a gate," she said, eyes locked on Harlan. "This is about respect. You disrespected a man who's given more than you'll ever understand, and you did it in front of his brothers, his community, his country." Harlan's hands shook as he gripped his gavel. "This court is in recess," he barked, rising abruptly. "Clear the room." But the crowd didn't move. One by one, people stood, veterans, locals, even the court stenographer, not in protest, but in witness. They stood for Jake, for Amanda, for the medal now cradled in his hand. Jake's live stream hit 10,000 viewers, then 20,000. Comments flooded in. "This is America. Honor the fallen. Shame on that judge." The bailiff hesitated, unsure whether to enforce Harlan's order. The judge stormed out, robe flapping behind him, leaving the room buzzing with an electric silence. Jake stayed at the stand, medal in hand, face unreadable. Amanda placed a hand on his shoulder, quiet, unspoken acknowledgement. As the crowd slowly filed out, a few veterans approached Jake, offering nods and quiet words. "You did them proud," one said. Jake just nodded, eyes distant. By noon, Jake's video had gone viral, spreading across social media, picked up by veterans groups, news outlets, and influencers. Headlines blared. "Judge orders tomb guard to remove Medal of Honor." The American Legion called it a disgrace to our nation's values, while the Congressional Medal of Honor Society demanded a public apology from Judge Harlan. The next day, Warrenton was a different town. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. Veterans held a silent vigil, standing in formation with American flags. Jake didn't join them. He was back at Arlington, walking his 21 steps at the tomb of the unknown soldier, uniform pristine, medal back on his chest. Each step echoed a vow he kept sacred. A week later, under mounting pressure, Judge Harlan resigned. The courthouse issued a brief statement. "Judge Robert Harlan has chosen early retirement for personal reasons. No apology, no acknowledgement." But everyone knew the truth. Jake's video had done its work. The judge's name faded, just a footnote in a story that belonged to honor. Jake never spoke to the press. When asked outside his apartment, he simply shook his head. "There's nothing to say. I'm just doing my job." Then he returned to the tumto, the rhythm of his steps, to the silence of the unknowns. Across the country, something shifted. That day in Warrenton became a touchstone shared in VFW halls, military forums, classrooms. A reminder that honor doesn't bend not to power, not to gavels, not to anything. One rainy evening, Jake stood alone at the tomb, marble wet and solemn. He touched the Medal of Honor, fingers tracing the star. "For you," he whispered, naming the men he'd lost in Afghanistan, one by one. Behind him, in the shadows, Colonel Amanda watched silently, guarding the moment like a sentinel. The rain fell softly as Jake walked on 21 steps, pause, turn, repeat. The tomb was quiet, but its voice carried across a nation. This is the story of a tomb guard, a courtroom, a medal, and a moment that redefined honor in a small Virginia town. At the tomb of the unknown soldier, where every step is a vow and every pause a prayer, the greatest tribute to the fallen is standing tall against injustice. So take a moment today, think of Jake, Amanda, and the soldiers whose names are carved in silence. Share this story not just to honor them, but to remind us all that dignity is the truest measure of service. If you've ever been to Arlington, stand at the tomb, watch the guard's precise steps, and listen closely, you might just hear the steady, unbroken pulse of a nation echoing through time. What do you think? Where do we draw the line between respect and authority? Should symbols like the Medal of Honor be untouchable, even in a courtroom? Share your thoughts below. Let's talk about justice, honor, and what it really means to serve.